Welcome. I'm glad you're all here for our 11th Ojai Chautauqua panel. I have to say, of all the panels that we've worked on, this has been the most interesting and in a way the most relevant to our experience. And I'm very happy you're all here. I never know how to dress for these things. So I was there and I thought, I have my tuxedo there on the bed, and then I thought, nah, too much. And I thought, well, what about it just slacks? No. So I decided I'm going to do something really bold. I'm going to dress like an Ojai tourist today. Because I love Ojai. Like you all do. Thank you. So our Ojai Chautauqua committee has decided that at least once a year we're going to focus on a local issue. And that's what this is about today. So it really comes from the committee, so you should thank them for that. I want to explain what's on your seats. So a lot of you received this prior to tonight, and so hopefully you have it as a PDF or in your computer. So we put one in every other chair, thinking, save some paper and you can share it. If you want one of your own, let us know, definitely. And I can email you, or you could take one of these home. And in the back, there's going to be 2 boxes. If you want to recycle them, we'll recycle them again, obviously. So put them in the box if you don't want to take one home. And that your pens can go in that box too when you're done. So I want to just talk a little bit about this packet in front of you. It should be pretty self-explanatory, but a couple of features. We just took as much data as we could. Our advisory committee suggested a lot of things like the history of Ojai, and everything is sourced, the Ojai Museum. We took a story from the Ojai Valley News, just the history of the Ojai Tourism Improvement District. And what we found out in our research is that just what the transit occupancy tax is and what the OTID were, a lot of people didn't understand that. So we hoped we got a little explanation in there. And the rest is just data for you to decide what it means, and we have a panel here to help illuminate that. But I want to alert you to a couple of important things. The inside back cover, you'll see continuing the conversation. And so after this panel, we will be going to the Ojai retreat, and there'll be a reception there, and the panelists will be there. So if you want to continue the conversation, you're welcome to do that. And you'll see that there's a list of events coming up next year, also at the Ojai retreat, with specific topics related to this, such as sustainable tourism, traffic, and so on. And then the last page, these are our sponsors. These are people that are donating to the Ojai Chautauqua and making these events possible. So there's brochures on the back table there, and we hope sincerely that you will be able to add your name to this list to contribute to these things, which we think are very valuable. You also have on your chair a postcard. So what's going to happen is the conversation will be going on, and about halfway through, in about an hour, Tom, our moderator, he will say, now's your chance to ask a question. So you can write your name on the card, write your question, and high school students will be coming down, getting the questions. We'll sort them out and then bring them up to Tom to ask. So it's a chance for you to participate in that. So thank you very much for coming here. And with that, I'd like to introduce Tom Krause, the president of the Ojai Chautauqua Committee and the moderator for tonight, and our panel.
Greetings. Good afternoon. It's nice to see you all here. Gosh, there are a lot of things that people could be doing this afternoon. It's a lovely, lovely afternoon in Ojai. And so we're all in this room. Instead of being outside, we could be hiking or playing golf or sitting in the backyard, enjoying this lovely fall afternoon. So it must mean there's something important to us about this subject that we're going to discuss today. I have some very brief comments, and then I'll introduce the panel. We'll go for an hour or so. If we're still speaking to each other at that point, we'll take some questions from the audience, and we value your questions a lot, so we'll allow sufficient time for you to pose questions, and we'll pay close attention to them. So just a word about the idea of the Chautauqua. What is it that we're trying to do here? What we're trying to do is give you the best information that we can about important and controversial issues. In the past, we have directed our attention to national and even global issues. So we've had panels on fracking, water, GMOs, immigration, income inequality, the role of media in society, presidential politics. Today, we're turning to a local issue, which is tourism good for Ojai? And our objective is to open that issue up so that you can see it more clearly and form your opinion about the answer to that question yourself. So that's different than many kinds of forums where the real purpose of what looks like information is really to convince you of a certain point of view. And that's what you see on network television these days, and that's what you see in political speeches and political action groups of various kinds. Not to say that isn't a good thing or it's a bad thing, but just to say that's not what we're doing here. What we're doing here is not trying to convince you of a point of view, but making every effort to give you the benefit of the variety of perspectives that are available out there on this particular issue. So to do that, we have a wonderful panel today, people with various points of view, a lot of diversity in opinion. We think that's a good thing. We have encouraged them to speak frankly. We've encouraged them to have a civil conversation, but not one in which they try to agree with each other. In fact, we've encouraged them to feel free to disagree with each other where there is disagreement, but to do that in a productive kind of a way. So to my immediate left is Caryn Bosson, founder of the Ojai Youth Foundation, now a consultant to nonprofits, and knowledgeable about the emerging field of sustainable tourism. Next to Caryn is Dennis Rice, an educator, former educator, now president of the Ojai Defense Fund. Next to Dennis is Leslie Clark, an artist, founder of the Nomad Foundation and owner of the Nomad Gallery. And then to her left is Johnny Johnston, the former CEO of Ventura County and the present mayor of Ojai. And then Hallie Katz, co-owner of Human Arts, a local gallery that represents the work of 150 artists, many of them from Ojai. And then Michael Hallie, a pro-community activist, a relatively new member of our community, coming from Napa 2 years ago or so. Please welcome our panel. So, one thing that I think most of us have in common is the idea that Ojai has something special about it. We love the Ojai Valley, and we don't want it to be ruined or turned into some different kind of community than it is now. So before we dig into the more controversial stuff, can we talk briefly about what is it that we hold dear about Ojai? So I'd like to ask each panelist to tell us briefly, from your perspective, what is special about Ojai?
Hi, everybody. So glad you're here. Can you hear me? Okay. What is special about Ojai? I think we can all agree that what's so special about Ojai is that there is so much that's special about Ojai. I mean, Ojai, regardless of whether you consider yourself a spiritual person, is a spiritual place, and it's a sacred place. And I think it's no accident that here in the sea of suburbia, that's Southern California, we still have a thriving community that's really still a community that hasn't been taken over by strip malls and large tract developments. And that's because we have been so fortunate in having a line of leaders, a long, long line of leaders who have come here and have understood the sacred qualities of this valley from, and I can't speak for or even know what happened with the Shumash, but I understand that it was a sacred place for them. Certainly, in the last couple of centuries, we've had people such as Annie Besant come here and believe that Ojai could be the cradle for a new civilization. And we have had dreamers and idealists and people who have been inspired, artists, to here in our community doing amazing work, and it's a through line. And so I guess I just feel so privileged to live in a place where there is so much to be cherished and where my community does cherish its specialness. And I guess that's all I'll say right now.
Well, first of all, it's a drop-dead beautiful place. And you appreciate that every day. I have raised, together with my partner, 5 kids here in Ojai. It's a wonderful place to raise children. It's a wonderful community of people. And so I just really appreciate living in a place where I know my neighbors. I really like my neighbors. I like my neighborhood. People care for each other, care about each other. We'll go on to talk about this, but I enjoy shopping and giving my money to my neighbors when I go into shops. I like the fact that when I spend money, it stays in the community. And so I believe in community, and it's one of the reasons that I agreed to join this panel is that I believe very strongly in the spirit of community. I think that most people here probably do, and that's why you're here. So I enjoy being here because it's just such a fine place to live.
Well, to repeat what Dennis just said, it is a beautiful place, and I love the natural beauty, and I love the care that we take to protect that natural beauty. We have the Land Conservancy who has brought us beautiful trails and preserved those trails for all of us. I've lived on a beautiful ranch next to Ojai for all of my life. My dad bought it just before I was born. My brother and 2 sisters still live there, and we've loved the Ojai Valley all our lives. I love the culture of Ojai. In this day of where flat screen televisions are replacing wall art, we just opened 2 new galleries, and we have actually 9 art galleries in the downtown block. I think that's very special. Art galleries are closing all over the country. I like the diversity. There's an economic diversity and a inclusion, an inclusive feeling of Ojai. Whenever we've had big issues, we come together and figure it out. We stopped Weldon, we rebuilt the Libbey Bowl, we rebuilt the pergola, and we all did it together as neighbors because we love this place. I like the stores, unique, anywhere, and I like tourists. I like that Edward Drummond Libbey came here as a tourist. I really liked that my grandmother came here as a tourist in the early 1900s, and she fell in love with the stagecoach driver who was a really handsome guy and became my grandfather. I was born here. My family's been here for 150 years, and I've seen all the transformations they and I have seen, all the transformations that Ojai has gone through. And I think Ojai is better than it's ever been. But I also know that it needs a plan, and we all need to care about how it moves forward.
Tom, would you go through that list of things that we all might be doing this afternoon if we weren't here? I didn't realize I had a choice or an option. When Tom asked me to join the panel, I thought, well, let's see, I ran for the city council based on civil discussion of controversial issues. How could I say no to Tom? So here I am, and my family and I came here almost 50 years ago now. What was special then and is still special, relatively speaking, to the rest of Southern California at least. Ojai is not only a unique and beautiful setting, but it's of human scale. where when you look out your window, you can actually see kind of the boundaries of which, for any of you who live in the San Fernando Valley or the LA Basin on an average day, although the air quality's gotten better, you could have been anywhere. You couldn't see mountains, you couldn't see anything. And I think that makes a difference in how a community interacts when you realize you're part of something in a special place. We are an extraordinarily safe and healthy community. I guess the one thing about Ojai has always been it is a state of mind as much as a place, and I hope we keep that state of mind. I was the 4th manager in 6 months in the city of Ojai in 1971, and I can tell all you folks that while it's controversial now, it's always been controversial. It's just like a family, the infighting, because if you care, you speak up. And this is a great place to live, and we all need to speak up.
There are people in the back standing. There are lots of chairs up here that are open. If you would like to have a seat, it's a commitment to sit up here, but we would welcome you. Hallie.
All of the things that have been said about Ojai and the reason that the folks who spoke love it, they're on my list too. I'm just even more grateful that I landed here with my husband. We were able to take part in a business that was established in the arcade by my former partners that began in 1975. It took us exactly 15 minutes to decide to come here. We were living in Sherman Oaks. We said, we'll sell the house, we'll rent the house, we don't care. We're moving to Ojai. And we've been very privileged to keep that gallery, that shop, it's fine craft shop, going all these years when in the face of many, many businesses closing all around the country. We still have a great fan base here. We love the tourists that come, but we love the residents that have supported our business and other businesses in Ojai. It's so great to be ambassadors for Ojai. When folks come to visit, we get to tell them all the good things about town, what to do, where to go, and we're just so proud of it. So I hope to continue here for a very long time and work with people who are on the panel here to think about solutions that everybody can get on board with and go forward.
I just moved down a little bit less than 2 years ago. My wife and I were grape growers up in Napa, and we came here as tourists for a number of years before we moved down here. And I love the same things that other people are talking about here. I love the spirituality. I love the mountains. I look at the mountains every day, and they're just so beautiful. And the thing that I love the most about Ojai is the people that are here. It's a small community, and people feel really connected here, and everybody has been really friendly to us. And coming here as a tourist, I thought I would constantly chat with people because I was thinking, well, maybe I'll move here one of these days, questioning them, and I thought I had an idea about what it was like here. The tourists have no idea what it's like here. I did not have any idea what it's like here, and it's so much better because we moved into a house, and immediately the women in the neighborhood took my wife in. She joined this women's group like within a week of getting here, and they're all very friendly, and it's like they're all best friends already. And look at me. Here I am. I'm already speaking to the entire community. I haven't even been here 2 years, and people are engaged, and they're listening, and they want to hear what I have to say. That's amazing. So I want to thank you is what I want to do for my opening thing.
Okay, well, I'll just add my 2 cents. There's a lovely Wallace Stevens poem, 13 Ways to See a Blackbird, and then near the end of that poem is the phrase, "It was evening all afternoon." And that's something I was reminded of driving over today. Ojai has these incredible, in the fall, all afternoon evenings that I just think are marvelous and wonderful. Okay, so we have seen a huge amount of controversy about tourism over the past year or so. social media, city council meetings, newspaper articles, emotions have been running high and disagreements have been plentiful. Caryn, what is at the heart of the controversy?
Well, it's a big question, but I'll say that I think Ojai has, in this way, been swept up in what's been happening in our larger world. The pace of change has been so rapid, and it's just getting faster. And the old ways that we've lived with for so long are not there. And new people are coming in droves, right? And we're not sure how we're connected anymore. In fact, we've got a lot of divisions. And I think that in some way played out in our recent tourism controversy here in Ojai. I mean, it just felt like things were being done to us. And a lot of people felt things were being done to us, whether I think on either side of the controversy. And I guess, not to go back and rehash things too much, but I think that what we tried to do in managing our tourism was to use an outdated structure. We used a hierarchical structure. We had a visitors bureau and a pot of money that a lot of people were not included in deciding about and even knowing about and understanding. And in our world where we're hyper-connected in so many other ways, that kind of structure just doesn't work anymore. There's a new line of thinking about tourism. There are journals. It's a burgeoning field. It's called sustainable tourism. And in your handout there, there's a quote from the World Tourism Association, now called the United Nations World Tourism Organization. And it talks about 3 elements that absolutely must be in place if there's going to be a sustainable kind of tourism, a tourism that benefits the community, the economy, the environment, all at the same time, and doesn't just go to an endpoint that becomes, completely off the charts. And those 3 elements are A, strong political leadership, B, a very shared community process or community buy-in, lots of broad involvement, and C, a clear vision of what the community, city, place wants to be and how it is getting there. And I put forward to you that in the last round of how tourism was managed in our community by really smart people who did a really good job, and there was a lot of well-meaning work, and there's been a lot of success if we turn it, in terms of certain measurements. But there were those 3 elements. I don't think were there. I don't think any of those 3 elements were there, and so things devolved, and they devolved in a difficult way. So that's my take on it.
Comments?
Well, I think there actually was a lot of tone deafness on the part of the leadership here, especially at first, and I think that people had to really, really fight to get heard, and I think part of the reason that it's still divisive, and I don't think it's over. Supposedly some issues have been settled, but look at this turnout for this. It's not really settled, and I'm very concerned myself that a lot of people feel like they haven't been heard. A lot of things aren't resolved, and I think that does go back to the leadership here. To go back to your question, I think part of the reason that it got so heated is that people feel like they're losing their community in a way. I mean, the thing about short-term rentals, you got strangers moving into your neighborhood. Many more people coming in. I was downtown yesterday. There's just a flood of people that I don't recognize, that I know that don't live here. And what happens to people, there's a need to belong. And I guess I'm acutely sensitive to it because that's one of the main reasons I moved here. It's a small town. I can park in front of the restaurant and walk right in. Are you kidding me? I couldn't believe that the first time I came here. And you like that, you need that. People need that sense of belonging. And so I think the downside of tourism, and there's a lot of good side to tourism, I'm not against it by any means, but the downside of it is that when you're bringing in a lot of people that don't live here, it creates this feeling of, you wake up one day and you look around and it's like, where's my connection? Where's my sense of belonging? And that's a very emotional thing for people. And so that would be my answer, on that question.
Okay.
I think that there have been a lot of misunderstandings in the last 10 years about this whole process that we went through to get here. And really, it was a matter of survival, say 10 years ago, 2007, 2008. The business in general in town and everywhere was so terrible. And do you realize that we did not have a common website to give information to travelers who wanted to come here? There was no common or collaborative effort to create what you go to now when you want to travel to a town to see where to go, where to eat, what events to see. We didn't have that. And a group of business people from downtown badgered the heck out of the city until we got some seed money to create a bona fide visitors bureau. They created a website and more, of course. For 2 years, it was a modest PR and marketing campaign. And then the OTID came along. The group of people that pushed it, the hoteliers, obviously, they had had experience with this type of thing in other towns, and they thought this would be the best way to gain an extra tax that could be applied to further marketing efforts. Unfortunately, at that time, I feel, and I was on the beginning of the advisory board for the Visitors Bureau, at that time, it became a hoteliers-only board, so that, because by law, it was mandated that they would be the ones to decide where the money was spent for marketing. So there was a major exclusion, I suppose, of people in the community. The city didn't want to attend meetings. They weren't interested. They gave us the check and said, go with it. And I think that there was a disconnect that was happening with a lot of people in the community. But we survived, we got through it. The website became bigger, bigger, bigger. More people came. I wouldn't say that we're making buckets of money, so the people in town, who have businesses, they do it because they love it. This is a lifestyle business that we have. I can speak for myself, although I feel I'm representing the merchants in town. We do it because we're passionate about what we're doing and we love people. So there's a lot of things that have to be changed now, but we still need a website. Now the Ojai Visitors Bureau is closed. We're back to square one. Everybody in town who has a business, a nonprofit, a festival, or any kind of event, restaurant, or hotel is going to have to promote themselves again on their own, and they are doing it. So tourism is not going to go away.
Okay, let me, a lot of what Hallie just said is quite accurate as far as the misunderstanding, the confusion, and the need for survival during the Great Meltdown. We had two of them. We had the one where the Ojai Valley Inn didn't open on time, which created all sorts of problems. But then when the 2008 the Great Recession started, something was needed. I think the reason for the controversy and the fight goes to what Caryn said about fear and the rapidity of change. There was a very, at least in the minds of most of the citizens that I talked to, and most of them who came to me, I didn't go out and seek it, was that there was an unusual correlation or coincidence between the OTID and the what they perceived to be increase in traffic and no preparation for accommodating the visitors to the town. The skepticism when the it came time to renew was because it was not really very well, I don't say it was deliberate, but it was not very well discussed and explained. The proposal was for a doubling of the original, going 10 more years into the future, and the ability to raise the fees possibly by as much as 100%. And so if you're worried about the speed with which you are traveling towards an unknown future, the last thing as a citizen that you want to see is to having somebody step on the gas and go that much faster until it was explained. And unfortunately, I was brand new on the council, and I know the council wrestled with this, trying to figure out what to do. And I had made a proposal after talking to the citizens who'd approached me to say, let's continue the OTID for 2 more years and give everybody a chance, the city and the visitors group and the Chamber of Commerce, everybody to work and measure it, and then explain it to the voters, and then have it coincide with the next city election where 4 of the 5 members of the council would be up for election. I don't know if the council missed my point on the idea of coinciding it with the next city election so the citizens would feel like they'd have a voice, but that motion died. I think it was made 2, possibly even 3 times, and then it was, the proposal was to go 3 years and 1.5%, which is a little different than what's in your manual, but not significantly different.
So can I ask this
Yeah,
question
sure.
of the whole panel? Was it good for Ojai to drop the OTID, and why? Was that a good call or not, and why?
Yeah, I'll finish the
Okay.
the shaggy dog story here. I don't think the question is, was it good or bad? It was unfortunate because we never had a really good measurement and explanation so we could set the issue to rest. I don't think it's going to hurt Ojai, frankly, that's my personal opinion, because there is so much momentum, and maybe the OTID got a bad rap. Maybe it was all Airbnb and the internet that is what drove most of this, and maybe the OTID wasn't really the one that was affecting it. But
I don't think it got a bad rap. I mean, have you been to Yosemite lately? The traffic there started in 2011. They passed their version of an OTID, the Mariposa County hotels, in 2008. We used to go, my wife and I used to go there all the time, and all of a sudden it's like, what happened? It's just unbelievable traffic. And it's because of the advertising campaign that the hotels there did. I definitely think it's good that the OTID got voted down. It was $7 million in new spending over 10 years. It was huge. That's a huge amount of advertising money, especially when you consider that advertising is getting cheaper and cheaper all the time. And what they were doing was what's called brand advertising, right? They're just, blast faxing these fawning articles that are kind of phony. You've seen them all, these travel articles all over the world. And it's creating an image of Ojai. In other words, it wasn't an event advertising like the Lavender Festival, where you send specific ads for this event to people regionally. And it creates a tremendous amount of interest in an area, and it brings in a lot of people. And that's what they did in Napa. It was like a tourist bomb went off after they started the, what do they call it there? The TBID, the Tourism Business Improvement District, in 2010. And then it just seems like it takes about 3 or 4 years, because it's a certain kind of advertising where it gradually pulls people in, but it has a long tail. It lasts a long time.
So Leslie, I think, wants to get in.
Okay.
Well, I think that perhaps the OTID wasn't doing the job that it could have done, but banning it has left locals as well as tourists with no place to go to find out what's going on in Ojai. And there's a lot going on. And you have to go to everybody's little individual website to find out, and you have to be in the know to know what website to go to. That's unfortunate. If we could have managed to adjust the way the OTID was run instead of just shutting it down. It's been very shocking for first the merchants in Ojai to have the Airbnbs banned. Our business went down. I've been to every store in the last couple of days asking how their business was affected after the banning of Airbnbs. That most said 10 to 30% down. That was shocking. And then, right behind that, the OTID is cut off. It stops on one day, and there is no promotion, no way to know what the events are by any locals. I think that's very unfortunate, and what it really has created is a polarization in our community that is not who we are. We come together and figure out our problems. We don't bicker and fight and call each other names. That's not who we are, and that's not who I want. That's not the community that I want to live in.
So
Yeah,
Caryn,
well-
I think Caryn's one. Yep.
Okay. Well, I thought that losing the OTID was a huge missed opportunity. I came late to the situation. I'd been working full-time in Los Angeles for 9 years, but well, I'll just say, when I heard that the OTID was looking for more funding because, from what I understand, there was still a lot of hotel vacancies, one has to think that had to be midweek, and that, that there was going to be more advertising just to try to get more people to stay in hotels. It made me realize, because I was also working with the nonprofit community in Ojai, that, you know, always is on the thinnest of margins, the least amount of money, running on fumes, so many, that there was a possibility of improving our nonprofit sector, back to the principles of sustainable tourism, improving our equity, our community, and our environment, and improving our economy, if we looked at the OTID and looked at a different structure, one that was representative of who lives in our community and allowed people to have a voice in how we want to direct tourism. If we had a vision for how we want to direct tourism, $7 million could do so much in this community. What do I mean by that? Let me give one example and then I'll stop, okay? But one example. So what I mean by that is, if we were to advertise midweek hotel stays at a hotel, because that hotel was partnering with an organization such as the Ojai Studio Artists, to expand their offerings and their ability to support the arts in Ojai, because they had a week-long series of offerings that then they didn't have to worry about marketing because it was being marketed by the hotel where the people would stay through the OTID. That's just one example, and there's many more that I could talk about. So.
Well, I think there still continues to be a misunderstanding possibly about what, we call it OTID for short, but it is a fee charged by hotels specifically for the benefit of the hotel, and we wandered a bit off that, although I think they tried to stay close to it. And just being on this panel in the other day when we got together to talk a little bit, I learned that many of the merchants were unhappy because the way the thing was run, but it was run fairly close to what the law says. That is not the way to fund what is being proposed. Chambers of Commerce used to do this sort of thing and have visitors bureaus, and so possibly that's where we should maybe put some of the attention. I don't think that we were harmed by the OTID going away, because the OTID wasn't supposed to be doing that to begin with. As far as the Airbnb, I'm not quite sure how that ties in with STRs, but if business fell off 30%, like Azu said, because of the STR, we must have had a lot of STRs in town.
Well, as long as we're on that subject, I would like to add that many of us felt that if the STRs had been regulated correctly, it could have been a good revenue stream for the city. When we started the Ojai Visitors Bureau, a lot of the talk with the hoteliers in the room was about how to get the city to recognize or find out about these short-term rentals, where they were, talk to the owners, and put a policy of some type with tax and or strict regulations in place to eliminate the bad guys, to have only owner-occupied STRs. I mean, there were a lot of ideas that floated around. And again, when confronted with the Ojai Visitors Bureau idea, of regulating. The city was not equipped, not interested, not able, and so that was a missed opportunity, in my opinion, to gain revenue that could have been used for a lot of good community.
Another thing about revenues, we're an older community. We've got, average age, I think, of 47. So we've got a lot of retirement people here. We've got a lot of people whose main asset is their home, and some of them are barely making it. And so they want to rent out their granny flat, but keep it sometimes for their grandkids. And they lost this ability to do that. And in many of the stores that I visited in the last week or so, they said, we lost a lot of locals shopping here because they don't have the discretionary income anymore because from the loss of their Airbnb income.
They're also very upset, the local people I've met who are upset about the short-term rentals, they don't want to shop downtown anymore because they think that we're for the short-term rentals. So I have lost customers, I have lost friends, there are people that will simply not come downtown because they know that we're in a different camp. And that has been very disturbing.
So what's wrong with regulating short-term rentals rather than banning them?
I could speak to that. Okay. All right. Well, for one thing, Airbnb themselves said that 84% of them in Ojai were whole houses owned by investors. And one of the biggest problems in Ojai right now is housing, affordable housing, any kind of housing. I mean, we have and going back to what I said earlier about community, it ends up hurting community because you're taking housing, which is meant for people to live in, and turning it into hotels. And we've got, a lot of hotel rooms, 600. I mean, that's a lot for a small town. And so, we're basically turning housing into hotel rooms that we need for people. And that hurts our community because we have more strangers, not only downtown, but in our neighborhoods. That's not good for a community. It hurts the community. Go ahead, Johnny. That's my main point.
Well, I was just going to say that anybody who's bought in Ojai recently can hardly carry a mortgage as a pensioner, but there are a lot of folks who have retired in place and that do have a need for extra income. The state of California has changed a lot of the laws, and the city council with Mayor Pro Tem Weirich's leadership has been fairly liberal in allowing for accessory units, second dwelling units, amnesty program. So people who need to rent something out in order to help make ends meet is going to be much better in the future. And people sometimes move into their granny flat and rent the house out, which is really good if we rent it to families or people who are going to live in the community. But when you make it into a hotel and make it so profitable that corporations and money from the outside comes in, and individuals buy up 4 or 5 of the homes in town. I don't know how many, but the lower end. And then with that as in mind, to do the short-term rental thing, it's very difficult to police and to control it. Short-term rentals, by the way, just for the record, have never been banned. They have just never been legal. And the council's doing what they can to try to regulate it, but it's clear that nobody's figured it out worldwide. And as with regard to streams of income, I would agree as the mayor and trying to balance the city budget that it's great to have stream of income, but in Hawaii, when I was over there about a year or 2 ago as a traveler or a visitor, I think the governor vetoed a law for the short-term rental, said we don't want the piles of money. That's the way they described it. We'll give you piles of money. They said, we don't want that. There are too many problems being created in our housing market.
Okay. Leslie, how can a brick and mortar store in Ojai survive against the competition of Amazon and the big box stores?
With difficulty. Many of them will not. We've already lost bookstores, stationery stores, record stores. People buy those things online. and nobody has ever been able to stay in business in Ojai without being flexible. My great uncle had a livery stable on the corner of Signal and Ojai Avenue. Well, he saw the writing on the wall and turned it into a drugstore. The livery stable wouldn't do very well today. When Nomad opened in 1996, we chugged right along pretty well until, with a couple of dips like 9/11 and when the inn shut down. But then 2008 hit us, and we had to reinvent ourselves. We couldn't make a living from selling paintings anymore, so we started making jewelry and selling clothing and selling more artifacts and selling smaller reproductions of art so that we could survive. Well, then we hit the next blip, which was we were almost back up to where we had been in 2005, in 2014, and 15 was looking pretty good, and then the Airbnbs, or the short-term rentals, were banned, and we went down 15 to 20%. And then we were kind of starting to come back a little bit, and then the Visitors Bureau was banned, and I don't know what that's going to mean. But the reality is we have a new generation of shoppers who aren't very acquisitive. The millennials don't want to buy stuff. They want experience. And that's what Ojai can offer any shopper. You go into any store in Ojai and you're going to learn something. You go into Nomad and you're going to find out, you're going to take a little trip to Africa. And you're going to hear about all the kids we've educated in the poorest country in the world. And if you buy an article of clothing there, you're going to, instead of supporting a factory in China, you're going to be supporting a little nomad woman in the poorest country in the world who's hand tie-dyeing the garment, and then a seamstress in Oakview, and then my employees who really want to live here in Ojai and need that job. And I like to think that there are other reasons to shop than that you need something. I like to think about where my money is going when I spend it. And I think that all of the stores in Ojai have a unique story. Much of what is sold in Ojai is made in Ojai. The honey, the wine, the jewelry, some of the clothing, the olive oil. This is a really vibrant, rich economy that we can support our local businesses and the behind the businesses. And I think that experience is what Ojai has and is the only way that it can survive against Amazon.
Hallie, you've had a store in Ojai in the arcade for a long time, many years. As a longtime merchant of a store serving the artistic community, can you give your perspective on tourism?
Well, we've covered a lot of that already, but I just have to say I love tourists.
Microphone.
Closer? Okay, thank you. I love having tourists come by. I think they're interesting. They're from everywhere. We're very fortunate in Ojai that we have many international associations like the School Wild Tennis Academy. People come from all over, Russia, Brazil. They bring their kids to go to school here in the private schools. I mean, it's fascinating to me. And so I have a story to tell, but so do they. They appreciate what we're doing in our town that's different from everywhere else that they've visited. And they tell us that shops like ours have closed in their town. So they can't wait to get back. They're all really nice. They're respectful. They spend some money. They come back in our store and tell us thank you for recommending a restaurant for lunch. It's just a great experience, and it has allowed our business, obviously, to continue. I think our average sales to residents may be a third of the whole, possibly a third to a half in some instances. And 2/3 regularly are sales to people who live anywhere from Santa Barbara to Los Angeles to Orange County, Santa Clarita, and beyond. So we feel very fortunate that we have these people coming, these inquisitive, delightful people coming to visit us.
Am I in the mic? Yeah. I'd like to ask just a question. Is there any opportunity within Ojai and the stores to, as long as the internet is there and Amazon, clearly I have great sympathy for anybody who has to compete with that, but are there opportunities to also sell the products from Ojai using the internet? Is that a...
Many of the stores do have websites. I have websites. There isn't, I mean, it's a very, I'm not sophisticated enough in promoting a website, but I think that a hub for all of Ojai that promoted everything in Ojai could be really beneficial to that side of our survival.
Brother that was a merchant, and he was in a very specialized kind of business in Burbank, and he eventually went with the net or the web and did more business over that than he was doing from his store. He still kept the store, but so that might be a strategy for if we're not already doing that.
Dennis, as an educator and president of a nonprofit, does tourism affect private schools and other nonprofits?
Well, I could say something about schools. And I think that as a longtime head of a school in Ojai, I always felt that schools weren't noticed for what we were doing in the community. If you notice, look at the stats. Really, I think the second largest employers, the list of employers, are really the schools in Ojai. At any given moment during the year, there are about 500 students that are in beds in Ojai, a couple hundred, 250 at Thatcher, another 100 at Villanova, then the others spread out between Besant Hill and Ojai Valley School and Oak Grove School. So of the 14 boarding schools in the state of California, and Weil Academy as well, 6 of them are in Ojai. All right? And that's 500 kids who have the opportunity to would come downtown on a Wednesday afternoon and spend their allowance. There would be, when their parents came to town, they would stay in the local hotels, and they would stay in local Airbnbs because they wanted to stay together with their families. They didn't want to, so there would be, oftentimes houses on the East End would fill up on a Thatcher parent weekend. But that's a tremendous boost to the economy because, and then for every child that's in one of those beds, there have been several families that come to town to be able to look at the schools, and they stay here and they eat at the restaurants and they shop at the shops, and so I think that schools are really not noticed for the fact that they bring a tremendous amount. They boost the economy in lots of different ways. But repeat your question to me, Tom, about how because I want to. The others, how does tourism
Affect private schools and nonprofits?
Well, I think that this is a particularly beautiful place to live, and so I mean the other boarding schools are places like Kate School, which is right over the hill in a beautiful place, and Dunn School, Midland School up in the San Ynez Valley, and so I think that people enjoy coming here. When you have your kids in a school here, you enjoy coming up and visiting them and participating. And so I think that it's in terms of nonprofits, one of the things that's been really encouraging to me since I've moved to town has been the proliferation of nonprofits. I love clearly I love the Ojai Valley Defense Fund, but I also love the Ojai Land Conservancy. What do people do when they come to Ojai? We're not like a ski area, or we're not like Yosemite. Basically, people come to town here to be able to relax, walk around, maybe see some shops or buy some art, or walk the trails. There's not a whole lot else to do here, I mean, in my point of view. So I think that I'm encouraged by organizations like the Green Coalition and the Land Conservancy and a lot of the activism in the valley that are protecting the environment for the valley. So I think that it's really been a good thing in that it's stirred community activism. I wish that more, not only Ojai residents, but even visitors could be encouraged to be able to, when they hike the trails, that there should be a way that they could contribute. I think that anybody that's hiking those trails, and I do on a daily basis, should contribute to those, to the Land Conservancy or the people that are keeping those things up.
We're going to start collecting cards with your questions on them shortly, so if you have questions, please jot them down, and somebody will be coming down the aisle to pick them up, and then we will talk about them. So,
Am my mic on? Yeah. I don't want to scream at you. Dennis, following up on Tom's question regarding the impact on tourism as it relates to the private schools, do they compete for the same lodging? Is that a problem at all? As tourism picks up and their kids are not in school, I've heard just people who come from around the world or from Los Angeles to visit us right now, is that kind of using the same lodging spots? Is that an issue?
They do. I mean, and it is a problem because when people come out for instance, like the Thatcher weekends where they bring a lot of families out, it's a challenge. And when the music festival happens, it's a challenge because people come to town and all of our beds fill up really quickly, and suddenly people are staying down in Ventura in order to come up here and listen to music. And we have events at schools where we want to be able to draw parents. We have performances. I built a theater, helped build a theater in the Upper Ojai, and we wanted to be able to, and we started the summer playwrights conference, exactly, and just to be able to bring people to town. But we housed the playwrights in the dormitories, but all the people that came to town stayed in town, and they ate at the restaurants, and they brought.
I'd like to say something about nonprofits. Nonprofits are the lifeblood of this community. They protect our environment. They make sure our kids are safe. They promote the arts. They keep us healthy. Ojai is so blessed to have so many nonprofits and such high-quality ones. And the issue here is with much of our community, there's economic difficulties. It's hard to raise the money. There's not enough money circulating in the community. There is such an opportunity, if we are to look at tourism holistically in a sustainable lens, for there to be amazing collaborations with our nonprofit community. Now the OTID's gone, so the idea of using the OTID to put heads in beds, but to bring people to and enrich our nonprofit sector with creative offerings, there's not the money source anymore, but there's certainly still the creative potential for that. We need to move forward into the future, even though we don't have what I was talking about. One of the elements of sustainable tourism is a clear vision that's unifying us towards something that we can all agree we want to do. That process is really necessary, but nonprofits can play a huge role in bringing the community together around a vision. But beyond that, I'm really hope that out of all of this, when it finally is settled, as Michael said, it's not settled yet, that our community agrees to have an inclusive process, to hear people's voices, to come up with creative solutions so that we can do in Ojai what may not even be possible in other communities, because we're Ojai, and have our tourists directed in the ways we want them directed, bringing money into the community the way we want them to bring money into the community, creating good local jobs. We've lost, in your handout, you'll see there were 150 management and professional jobs lost between 2007 and 2013. I know that some of them were in the nonprofit sector. We could bring those back if we thought of some win-win-win scenarios that involved our economy, our community, and our environment. So,
Caryn, if I
it's
can
an area
add to
of
that,
opportunity.
is when I read the page about sustainable tourism, the thing that leaps out at me is I think the terminology is wrong. I'm thinking about a sustainable community. And the fact is that and it's not just we're not just here to sustain tourism or even business downtown, and I think that that's one of the reasons, at least that people that I know had, were objected to maybe some of the OTID stuff, is that there's a lot of stakeholders in this community, and a lot of stakeholders felt left out. And perhaps it needed to die in order for the next thing that's going to come forward to be created. That's just my point of view.
Yeah, I would agree with you about that, because it seems like, I mean, we've talked the STR issue to death, to me, it seems like. But the OTID, it was kind of like one extreme to the other, and the whole thing just got knocked down. And one of the things I'm really concerned about is this is the first time we've had like a meeting to talk about tourism in Ojai, and tourism is the issue in Ojai. It's the biggest issue in Ojai. We've had meeting after meeting about tiny homes, about chaparral, about everything. People meet and talk, and for some reason, it's just been 3 minutes. You get to talk 3 minutes when something comes up at a city council meeting, and that's it. I think we need to do a lot more discussing about it here. Because it's going to go on, because tourism is here. A lot of people feel like it's gotten too out of control. Other people, the business people downtown, feel like they're not getting the support that they need in the terms of the advertising. And I think that we as a community could come together and work this out so that we could have more of a win-win situation.
I've been here since 1977, and it's been the same conversation.
Oh, about tourism?
There's nothing new.
Oh, okay. Well, since I've been here, this is the first actual
The first advice that I got
meeting.
when I arrived to Ojai was, first of all, that when you go downtown, you don't have to lock your car, or the only reason that you have to lock your car is somebody might leave a bag of zucchini in your back seat. But then, it's Ojai. But the other was, don't go downtown on the weekend, there's too many tourists. Right? That was 77. And it's always been that way. I think it's been that conversation forever.
All right, good.
Johnny, when we talk about Ojai, when we say Ojai, we mean the community of the Ojai Valley. That is a population of about 30,000 people, but the city of Ojai is legally just about 7,500 people. So about 25%, that's about 25% of the population of the actual community. So voting rights and members of the city council are drawn from this minority population, meaning that over 75% of the community is disenfranchised. How can we have a vibrant and intelligent political community, one capable of grappling with difficult issues like tourism, when most of the population can't vote?
Okay, let me answer that. I think we've had rather vibrant discussions in the Valley for the 50 years I've been here, and there's probably been as much participation, except at the polls, from throughout the Valley, except down in Oakview, and Oakview generally didn't wish to participate for whatever reasons, sort of a subcultural difference. 3 different times, the city of Ojai went out to the greater valley, the Ventura River Valley as well as the Ojai Valley, and proposed just, your term disenfranchising usually applies to some place where someone had a vote and it got taken away. In this situation, the votes were never there, but every time the thing was proposed, the folks who don't live in the city said, why would we want to be part of that, screwballs down there that fight on Tuesday nights? Then when the city would finally get a bona fide offer from somebody, they'd say, well, why do we want to expand the boundaries and have to pay for their bills? So I guess I would invite anybody who's really seriously interested, preferably those who are contiguous to the city, to sit down with me and we can talk about annexation. But the East End in the past has not wanted to be part of the city. The Miners Oaks vehemently opposed joining the city for some reason way back. I've told some people, former Mayor Bill Burr told me that the explanation for that was somebody stole somebody's chicken about 100 years ago and they've never gotten over it, and so the feud continues. But the reality is that we could be one community, and that was the first thing I proposed when I came here 48 years ago as city manager, and I thought that would be a great thing to do, and boy, they handed me my head. Jim Lobel tried it, and he had the same experience, but if there are folks out there that were applauding that would like to join in some sort of movement for annexation, I think that would be a great conversation.
Please.
Well, short of annexation or creating a valley-wide city, there was something interesting done 20 years ago, and I was part of it. So then City Manager Andy Belknap and Mayor Steve Olson decided to do a valley-wide solution for what to do with our youth. There was expected to be a youth quake, even more teenagers on the streets, and the League of California Cities at the time, cities either prepared to build more juvenile detention facilities or create more after-school programs because more teens are coming. And so they decided to do an Ojai Valley Youth Master Plan. And they had the city was in it, and the county was in it, and the sheriffs were in it, and the school district was in it. And for a full year, we gathered input from 3,000 people. And what we created turned into the Ojai Valley Youth Foundation, which then, because of the strength of all of this community involvement, ended up getting a $1 million grant, became a statewide model, and it exists to this day, even with a much diminished budget at this point. But it is possible with creative and strong leadership that's very inclusive toward a vision.
Did this go on or not? Yeah. Andy Belknap should also get credit. He also had his head sort of handed to him. He was the third one that tried to make it a valley-wide city, and then he did join with you folks. I remember when that was done, I was with the county, and it was a successful effort, but it was the substitute effort because as a city and people to vote, for some reason the vote wasn't strong enough motivation to get people to want to become part of Ojai. But maybe that's changed.
Maybe so. Michael, I want to talk to you or ask you about social media. And before doing that, I want to just relate some of my own experience with not social media, but with email communication within organizations. So my work is about how organizations function and how to improve the way they function. And one of the things that you learn really early on is that if you disagree with someone, the way to settle the disagreement is not over email. In fact, you learn very quickly, if you're in any kind of organizational life, that when you have a disagreement, you call them on the phone and you say, preferably let's get together in person, but at least let's have a conversation. And maybe 90% of those kinds of situations get resolved easily and quickly. On the other hand, if you get into an email exchange, it's so easy for people to misunderstand each other, for innuendo to be taken in the wrong way, for just various ways that it can blow up and become a kind of a fake issue. Now, I'm wondering about social media in that context, with social media as a way of the community talking to each other and trying to address and potentially resolve issues. So certainly with respect to this communications process around the issue of tourism in Ojai, we've had lots of stuff on social media.
Right.
And so my question is, has the effect of social media about tourism been a net positive or negative for Ojai?
I think in the end, I have to say it's been a net negative, unfortunately. I don't think Facebook conversations work unless there's strong moderation. And what we had here, OCF, probably a lot of you are on it or have read it, it wasn't moderated, and there's just enough people that will be nasty, and they end up controlling the whole situation. I was a moderator for like 7 years in a spiritual group that had sort of a closed bulletin board type conversation, and I learned a lot about having to do that, about how it works. And the problem with those kind of situations is that the nastiest people will end up controlling the whole thing unless you get rid of them. I mean, that's basically it. That's why we have a police department. You know, if we didn't have a police department, guess what would happen? You know, just knowing they're out there keeps things under control. So it got really nasty on Facebook, as probably a lot of you know. And it's such a potential, though, to communicate. It's attractive. I'm on it a lot. I love talking to people. I love communicating with people. But now, nobody's talking about it anymore because it just got too nasty and too negative. So I think if somebody was willing to do it, if we had a tightly moderated group, it could be really of great benefit. But the way it is right now, I don't think that it was. I'd be really interested to hear what other people think about that.
Other comments on that question?
Well, I would agree with you, Tom. I don't know if it's our generation, but I think anything that is emotional or subtle should not be debated with, I don't even know if you could do it on chat or whatever, the Skype, where you can actually see the person, but so much is lost in communication when you think about the words are only a small part of it, and if the words are just banged out over the internet and are misunderstood, sometimes people even trying to have some good-natured humor tend to offend their audience. So I don't see how that can actually help things, particularly in the area of tourism. I think Caryn's idea of having a community group or something where we're face-to-face is a more productive way to go about it.
With ground rules and guidelines of how do we want to conduct ourselves, and this isn't really just about tourism, this is about the kind of community that we want to be. And what are the ground rules and guidelines that are going to govern our conversation, how we treat each other, how we respect each other. And this is an opportunity, actually, for us to develop that, because then it can be toward the community that we can create the community that we want to live in. We have that opportunity. But right now, nobody's in charge, and that's a problem.
Okay, we're going to go to your questions now, and I just want to show you the stack here that came up, which is delightful and wonderful, and we're just very pleased. But we're not going to get to them all. And after each Chautauqua, we get some feedback about questions, and people say, well, why didn't you answer my question? You only answered certain other kinds of questions and not the most important ones. So what we do is someone picks them up, and then in the back we have a panel of people who go through them and sort them into some kind of order and pick the ones that they think are the most relevant questions. So we're not trying to pick certain ones for any particular reason except that we think it's a good question. So if we don't get to yours, please send it to the email, email it to the website, and we'll try to respond in that way if we don't get to it here. So this first question, I think, is for the panel in general. We have not explored, we in this forum have not explored the economic impact of tourism. For example, the income from sales and bed tax to the city council budget. Can we expand upon that?
That quite a bit, because there was a sheet, it might be in your packet. You know, one of the things it says on this sheet, I'll just read it for people who don't have it, is that Ojai's economy depends on tourism. You know, and I just disagree with that right off the top, because Ojai's economy, Ojai is a bedroom community that is a suburb of Ventura and somewhat of Santa Barbara. And every morning, 2,200 people get up and they commute into work in Ventura, in Los Angeles, in other places. The labor force here is 3,400 people. That's the basis of Ojai's economy. And tourism is kind of a really nice, interesting sidelight, but that's not where we're supporting ourselves. We're supporting ourselves, career-oriented people get jobs outside of town. This town is not a business-oriented town. When we moved down here, this is my wife sitting here, one of the first things the realtor said is, you know, well, you're not moving to Ojai for a job. She said, people don't move to Ojai for a job because there's just not that kind of job here. Tourist jobs pay the lowest of any industry. In the packet that you got, it said $30,000 for leisure. The county just did a huge study about the economy in Ventura County, and they called it hospitality. It's the same. And they came up with $20,000 as an average salary. And, you know, I'm not saying either one of them is wrong, but the point is that it's low paid. And the jobs that tourism attracts, you can't make enough money to live in Ojai. And it's a huge problem here. They don't pay a living wage. A one-bedroom apartment is like $1,400, $1,450 on average. $20,000 a year, that's what, $1,700 a month. You can't make it on that. So thinking that tourism is going to solve any economic problem here, I think, is a myth. It's important to support the businesses, and I fully agree with that. And I would like to see some advertising and other things done to support the businesses downtown. But to come in and say that, the other thing is that there's more jobs. Ojai is a job machine. There's 5,100 jobs here. Labor force is 3,400 people, 2,200 of whom are driving out of town. That means we're bringing in 3,000 or 4,000 people a day to work here. We're generating jobs for the rest of the county. So I just don't agree with the argument that we need tourism for the economy or that it's the basis of our economy. It's not.
So I think the question asked about the bed tax, for example. So the bed tax, aside from the OTID, the bed tax provides about a third of the city's budget.
That's almost all from the Ojai Inn and Spa, which is
About
God's
half.
gift to Ojai.
About half, actually.
About half,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Well,
But I mean, that's a huge amount, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just trying to reflect the questioner, what I think the questioner is trying to get at. What would we do if we didn't have that? I mean, that's and that, by the way, isn't, as I think you know, but I'm not sure the audience knows, isn't paid for by the hotel. It's paid for by the guest.
right.
So the guest has their bill marked up 10%. And then that 10% markup is paid by the hotel to the city, and that makes about a third of the city's revenue. I mean, a third.
TOT tax.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
29%, I read.
well, in recent years, it's gone up a little bit.
And it's still going up.
Currently, it's about a third. But I mean, that's major, right? That's a big
Yeah,
deal. I mean,
it is, but I don't think it's going away. The question really is one of balance and where we're going in the future. To continually try to expand that. I mean, Johnny has said that Ojai has the second highest per capita tax collections of any city in Ventura County. I mean, we're the envy of the state. We have a lot of cash coming in here already, and my concern is, yes, we need to support that and we should keep that going, but why would we want to continuously expand it? There's people who seem that they just want to expand it, and I think it gets out of balance because the biggest issue with constant expansion is when you expand, you lose community. You take housing and you convert it into hotel rooms. Downtown becomes even more crowded. And, we've got to have a balance between that. And I think we're in a really good place. I mean, Andy Gilman asked me what I think about tourism just flat out when I met him. And I said, I think we're in a good place right now. Let's not push it. Let's not throw the balance off. And I just get very concerned that they're pushing too hard to try to grow it all the time. And if we grow it, we're going to lose what we love about the community. That's what happened in Napa. That's one of the reasons I moved down here. Napa was a beautiful small town when I moved there, and they just kept pushing the tourism till the point where, you couldn't even get in the coffee shop because there's lines out the door all the way down the street. Who's got time to wait 30 minutes?
I
Okay,
have a
we've got a
question.
couple of other comments.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm confused about, you could tell me about the thousands of people that are leaving the valley to work. How are they helping to support our community other than paying property tax?
Because they get a paycheck and because they go to the grocery store.
And where do they spend that? They spend it in Ventura before they come home.
No, they're supporting all the local serving
Oh,
businesses.
I don't think so.
No.
I meet so many of them who never come downtown because the stores close at 5 o'clock. And granted, we're not there after hours because nobody comes downtown. It's
Vons is packed all the time. Is that all
Yeah.
tourists?
Can I weigh in? I can address that subject in the.
I'm new, okay?
Yeah, okay, well, inasmuch as you used me as a footnote, Michael, I need to clarify the thing on the per capita general fund income. We actually are the highest per capita income in Ventura County, and we have double the half of the cities in Ventura County. We have twice as much, and the remaining two, we have half again as much. So you are correct. We are doing very well in that regard, and that is helpful, very helpful to the city. In 1971, there was no bed tax. Town hasn't grown that much, but we were still getting along okay. That was when the bed tax was put in. I take some responsibility for the controversy today because we have succeeded beyond our wildest dreams when the same conversation was being held in the early 70s. What are we going to do for an economic base? Nobody wanted factories. Nobody wanted the dirty industry or things that would pollute because we had very bad air then. And I fear that our air might be having some problems again. But right now it's so much better than it used to be. But one of the ways which we said, okay, the plan is this. We are a very attractive place. It's authentic. These are not paper mache mountains, like going to Disneyland. You're actually in a real place, and I said that will draw. Back then, I don't know what the population was, but today they got a 14 million population market within 2 hours drive time to come to Ojai. People like coming here. That was the plan. The plan is that you aren't going to get a lot of factories unless you want to widen your roads, put in freeways. So tourism is a good thing. It's a good way to do it. It could be clean, and things could work out well. We wrote the redevelopment plan and the village center plan to save the arcade and to expand it. There's about twice, 3 times the number of buildings down there today than back in that day. And yet back in that day, we were still making it. So it's really not a question of tourism or no tourism when it comes to the city. It's a matter of how we spend the money. But I can tell you, and I'm sure members of the council will tell you, that the bed tax makes for a better community, and it's beneficial. So tourism, to the degree that they are paying bed tax coming to the city, I'm really pleased when I got on the council to see that your current city council is using a lot of that money to finally pave our streets and do the basic things that we should be been doing all along, some of which, if we didn't have, guests coming and staying in hotels, we wouldn't be able to cover everything. So it's a good thing, but it's not, we don't need, what I always say, I'd like Warren Buffett's comment, good times make for bad decisions. And that means right now, times are really good, and for the last few years they've been really good, but I think we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem that I know that makes me sound arch conservative, but it truly is, and I'm working with at least one member of the council who's sitting here, trying to figure out how we get that control over the budget so that we're not overly dependent upon tourism and then we sell our soul in order to balance the city budget. On the other hand, we should never turn our backs on the visitors who come here. They are good for the retail community, they're good for the service industry, they're good for all of us, and we are enriched by it, but we don't want to be killed by it. And I think therein lies the controversy.
I think that if we think about tourism as coming to downtown Ojai on Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday in the 2-block area and completely clogging it and impacting all of everything, then certainly there can be too much of a good thing. But if we look at tourism with a broader lens and think about how tourism can support the valley economy that we want with good local jobs where people can have children and work here and bring home a decent paycheck and be full-time members of our community, then we need to start thinking about it differently in the creative ways that I've talked about. Think about the spiritual organizations that we have in the Ojai Valley and how many people would really love to do programming there and spend time there. There isn't the infrastructure right now and the support for there to be these assets really utilized for visitors and locals alike. And I think that tourism is a way for us to strengthen all these wonderful local institutions we have if it's done carefully and thoughtfully.
So, Caryn, here's a question for you that will kind of fit right in with what you were just saying. What would an inclusive visioning process look like?
I knew someone would ask. Well, we did that for a year with the Ojai Valley Youth Master Plan. That was a long, long time ago. But it was pretty simple. It was get people in a room and have respectful conversation, no matter if they're 12 or they're, 95, and hear what they have to say. So everybody is heard. We came up with goals that really guided the community for decades after that people rallied behind because they were part of those conversations. Now things have evolved, and there are wonderful resources out there. There's an organization called Heart and Soul out of Vermont that does community visioning processes. It's like for communities where suddenly the mill closes or the downtown is completely deserted because of the big box stores. It's how to get neighbors talking to neighbors and come together with there are wonderful ways of you can draw things and write things and do arrows. What is it we want our community to be in the future? And how can we get there together? That's the question.
While you're talking, here's another question that I think is appropriate for you. What attractions could be promoted for young people?
You mean for young people to come to or to involve young people? I mean, I think that if we'd had the OTID money and there was an incentive, I had this idea that the OTID money could help do partnership advertising with different organizations or businesses if they adhered to the 3 principles of sustainability. So think about sustainability, the ability to sustain something long, long, long into the future as being a stool, and it has 3 legs. And one of those legs is the environment, one of those legs is the economy, and one of those legs is the community. And in order to get funding or to be part of this, you had to come up with a way of supporting the community as well. So let's say you were Meditation Mount and you wanted to partner with Sunito Inn on a week-long retreat because you were able to bring in Deepak Chopra because of the OTID money or some money, or OTID was going to be able to really promote it properly so the money would come in from visitors, then there could be a requirement that there's an internship program for young people. I'm just making this up. It could be any nonprofit. I'm not doing a commercial for Meditation Mount. An internship, or that Deepak Chopra goes into our schools, or something where there's a deliberate benefit for young people.
So here's another question, but...
Is it on? Yeah. I don't think our problem is attracting people here. It's accommodating people that want to come here.
They don't know what to do when they get here. I mean, they walk around the 2 blocks of downtown and they go, they go to 1 or 2 places. They don't know.
That may be, but it just seems to me that it depends on, I guess, the 2 general views. Are we, are viewed as a commodity, something that we're trying to sell, or are we viewed as a community that is extraordinarily attractive for people who want to come and visit us? I don't quite, I guess what I worry about, and I think one of the reasons there is so much controversy, is that there are people who feel as though we are moving towards trying to become Williamsburg or Jamestown or even Disneyland, an amusement park, as opposed to a community. I think our charm is what people come here for. We just have to figure out what to do with them when they get here, yes. What they do with their cars, how they get through the town, where they stay. And that's one of the problems with saturation.
Hallie?
If you had events and retreats and things like this that occurred during the week, it would help hotels have people in the rooms during the week, and perhaps the balance of tourism would be a little different. Everybody wouldn't be coming on the weekends.
So here's a really good question, I believe. It is Ojai a sustainable community? And then it's pointed out, average age is rising, school enrollment is dropping, home prices are rising. And we've all, and I'll just add, I hope the questioner doesn't mind, we've all seen cities go downhill. We've seen stores get boarded up and the economy going down and unemployment going up, and what was once thriving is no longer thriving because some basic aspect of what makes the community work, often economically, goes away. So the question is Ojai a sustainable community?
Yeah, I believe it is. But I wouldn't use the term sustainable. I say, the ability to live within our means, and are our means adequate? And I think the answer is yes. Whether we're living within our means is another question. And I think that that's kind of a losing strategy, to constantly wanting to upgrade one's standard of living by taking on additional jobs until the quality of life disappears. Again, that's the controversy.
When I agreed to be on this panel, one of the things that I did is I wrote letters to the mayor and chamber of commerce of a number of cities that, like Taos, New Mexico, Jackson, Wyoming. And my question to them was, what do you wish you had done 20 years ago? Because we're in that process right now. And of course, we are not Jackson. We are not on the doorstep of a beautiful national park. We don't have a ski area or any of that. But at the same time, the answers were really interesting. One of them was, we wish that the city had bought up property when it could still be afforded for both parking and affordable housing. That to look at the property that you have and do something about it now. The other thing was to basically to get a handle on the whole Airbnb, VRBO thing earlier on. For instance, one of the sounds, I think it was Jackson, a third of all the residences in town are second homes, and so a lot of those get rented out. So what they did is they basically set up a 10% tax, and the first 2% went directly to the schools and to youth programs. And then after that, then the city began to realize bed tax as we do, and it's been tremendously lucrative for them. But I just asked them, what do you wish you'd done? And they gave me a list, and actually some of them were very kind. I think the one mayor actually called me up and we talked for a long time about it, but it was an interesting process. I think
I can tell you a sad story.
Go ahead.
We could have, 20 years ago, 40 years ago,
Yep.
we could have purchased a property for $350,000. It's an old dairy farm. And the Clausen Dairy Farm, now Persimmon Hill. I could have been the proud owner of that whole development for $350,000 back in 1971. But unfortunately, first you have to decide where you're going to invest the money and for what purpose. And I would agree with whoever told you that. That's one of the reasons it's important now that we decide what we want to do. What do we want to? Are we going to? If we don't have parking lots, does that mean people will quit driving? I have an article I brought that I won't bore you with, but up north near Sacramento, somebody's building heliports to get into the little valley and driving their neighbors crazy. There's only one way to get into into the valley that's acceptable to all of us right now, and it's cars. And I don't know what we're going to do with them if we don't start.
Johnny, it seems to me is that we can look at available property. Like you look at what we did, we built up a public lot next to where that skate park is.
Right.
There is a tremendous amount of property right behind that that we could double or triple that alone. We've got a vacant lot sitting right next to the art center, and people, when they go to the art center in the evening, can't find a place to park. And yet that lot has been sitting there forever. Why couldn't?
And there's another one across the street from it.
Why couldn't the city purchase that and be able to create parking? And even when people do come into town, some of the best parking in town is at the lower courts at Libbey, but there's no sign that lets people know that you have to be, that you can go down there and park.
I agree with you.
So I would say that one of the things we need to do is to be able to manage people as they come in so that we can get them out of their cars and walking around, and they're not part of the traffic problem.
Right.
I think that is an example of if there was a collaborative approach with business and entrepreneurs and government to find some business opportunities of getting people out of their cars. What if we had parking down at the Amtrak lot in Ventura? Visitors came here on trains. They had a carbon neutral, had an electric van, bring them up to the Ojai Valley, and then we had a bike sharing program such as they have nowadays in many cities. I mean, those kinds of opportunities are possible if we get together and put our thinking caps on.
So here's an interesting question. Is it really Ojai to want to curb tourism because we don't want to see strangers?
I think there's some truth to that. I mean, you always hear people making jokes about people from LA, the man buns, the ponchos, there's kind of a resentment towards a certain kind of lifestyle. And I don't,
We have an abundance of strangers.
We have. I think it's really dangerous to be able to start thinking in an us and them mentality, and I think that it's not good. And it's not good even within the community to be thinking about us and them in terms of, the dirty shopkeepers downtown and all the people. I mean, there's this great website, the great Facebook site, The Other Ojai. I don't know how many of you are on it, These are the old timers. These are the people who look at us all as interlopers. These are people that went to school here and rode their horses into town, and whose parents owned shops along the arcade. And of course, Leslie could not be one of those interlopers because she's been here longer than any of them. But I think that it's dangerous to be able to create an us and them mentality. I love to be able to see when I drive downtown and somebody from LA is coming through, and I kind of slow down and wave them through to make a left-hand turn. I go, "Welcome to Ojai," you know. And but we need to be able to have a sign that says, "Hey, you know, welcome to Ojai. Slow down. You know, get out of your car and walk." Why don't we have programs to be able to encourage people to? I mean, my parents came up here. I learned about Ojai because they came here in the 1950s, and they would come up here for romantic weekends. You know, we had 4 kids in the family. I think they just came to have uninterrupted sex, frankly. But I mean, But they came here, and all they did is they walked around. They came up here. Maybe my dad played golf, but mostly they just came up here, and it's because it's a quiet, peaceful, beautiful place, and everybody's living these hectic lives down south of us, and they want to be able to just come up here and just be in love, or walk down the street, or look at some good art, or walk the trails. That's what they're coming here for, and we need to be able to welcome those people, and at the same time, be able to condition them to the fact is that they're no longer in Reseda or wherever it is, that they can actually slow down and enjoy the town.
Okay, Michael, here's a challenging question, which
Sure.
I'll try to put in the right perspective. Help us understand why a person who has lived in Ojai 2 years, who came here as a tourist, now wants to put restrictions on tourism.
I don't want to put.
That's why you were invited, right?
Yeah.
So they could ask that question.
I see.
Yeah.
I don't. Like I said, I think we're in a good place. I'm just concerned that it's going to grow too fast. And that comes from my experience in Napa. And I see the same things happening here that I saw in Napa. And maybe it's not going to happen here, but it's already happening a little bit. I mean, when I moved down here, I said to myself, I am not getting involved in politics again. You know, I was an elected official up there. I went through 12 years of this up there. And, you know, I got drawn in, and so many people have expressed concerns about how much tourism has grown. I don't have a personal perspective about that. I see how busy downtown is, you know, on the weekends, but I don't have 5 years ago and 10 years ago to compare it to. So I've just taken other people's word for that. And I've learned a lot about how government works and all those kinds of things. And I'm interested in local politics, very interested. So I'm trying to help with certain issues, especially the short-term rental issues, because I don't think short-term rentals are good for a community. So I'm not trying to limit it or get rid of it or whatever they said, but I'm just trying to say that you've got to keep a balance, and that it could so easily, so quickly. I mean, tourism as an industry is growing so fast worldwide. And if we had passed that OTID and they had continued to do that much advertising, we would have been swamped with people. I don't want that. And I don't think most people here do want that.
Can I hear one thing that I have a concern about? There are businesses in Ojai who really want to stay in business. And there's some that are very savvy about doing their own promotion. If we don't coordinate promotion, there will be haphazard promotion all over the place, and the people that are really good at it are going to be able to attract, as they will, anybody they want. If we had a coordinated effort, then we can have more control about how we invite people in, how we promote all of us. But if we don't have a central place, it's going to be all over the place, and we will have no say.
I wouldn't be opposed to that, not at all. It'd be better to be organized and think it through, absolutely. But the risk, again, is it going out of balance. And I think it seems like a lot of people feel that it's already gone out of balance.
The choice of either you're for tourism or you're against tourism, I think is a false choice. I think there's something in between. The people that talk to me are not against tourists or strangers. It's a matter, as you say, of balance. I was reading in the travel section of the LA Times about 2 weeks ago about Havana, Cuba, and I thought it was maybe Yogi Berra or someone of his ilk wrote the thing, but it was a real travel analyst, and what the article said was, you need to get to Havana soon before the tourists ruin it. Think about that, you know.
So here are two questions that are related. The first is, what connections do you see between tourism and water, space, and other natural resources? And the second is, how does tourism affect our water supply, especially considering we do not have a guaranteed supply?
I can speak a little bit to that because my neighbor is on the Casitas Water Board, and I knew that water was a concern about the tourist use of water, and I asked her, where does the water from Lake Casitas go? And she said, well, 40% of it is for ag, 40% of it is for the city of Ventura, which is a long-term contract, and 20% of it is Ojai, all the hotels, all the residents. Most residents, and she didn't give me an exact percentage, but the indoor use of water is negligible. It's the outdoor use of water, the watering of yards and ag, that uses the most water. So tourists don't water lawns. It's negligible, according to her.
Back 5 years ago, I was part of an effort by the Ojai Valley Green Coalition to look at, could Ojai achieve the goal of truly being a model, green, sustainable community by involving tourists to come to observe us and learn from us and create a kind of an educational relationship with visitors that helped us be incentivized to do more and more and more, so people would want to come and learn and learn and learn, and then we would become more sustainable, and the tourists and the visitors would be able to take what they learned back to their own community. Now, that never turned into an organized effort, but that is an example of having a vision of what we want our community to be, and then focusing our efforts on areas of tourism, areas with visitors, to move us in that direction.
Question related to that. I don't understand why the website funded by the OTID was taken down, but since it sounds like it was removed, why doesn't the Chamber of Ojai create a new Ojai website?
They don't have any money, do they?
Well, the Chamber of Commerce historically provides networking for its members, member-to-member networking and promotion. They don't really do tourist outreach. They do have a website, and somebody who's interested in moving to Ojai can look at it, and they can get a packet in the mail with details about schools and how it is to live here. So it's really a kind of different focus. They were the umbrella organization that governed the Ojai Visitors Bureau, but they were not the Visitors Bureau. We need a Visitors Bureau. That's one of the things that needs to come out of this discussion that will go on. And I think that when the Ojai Visitors Bureau ended, everything had to be shut down because there were no funds. So it would be prudent to think about how we want to represent ourselves in the future, but it's not the Chamber's job to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a little different
Please.
approach to that, since that is the major economic engine of the town. That's usually what chambers actually do. They had the advantage of having a source of revenues from the OTID, but the Visitors Bureau office was never, I went down on weekends to see, it was never open, so it never really functioned as a Visitors Bureau. It was a promotional agency to advertise the town, you know, around the country and around the world. But I think if they've got a website that's been built, then that money's already been spent. It would seem like it might be a possibility that the chamber could take that on and operate it. I don't know how effective it'll be, but it is an activity that chambers do engage in. The idea of Visitors Bureau is a relatively new phenomenon in the last couple of decades. to separate the functions.
And I see it differently. I see the city perhaps being a partner in this and creating what you might call a cultural affairs department like they have in Ventura. We have never had the city get involved in creating events or even following through with some of the redevelopment ideas that were put forth in 1999 when they hired a firm to come down from San Luis Obispo who had just designed their downtown and give us all kinds of ideas of how to create a downtown that would be friendly for residents, not only visitors. So I see the city needing to step up and be part of this plan, and I don't know if they could be the agency that would control a website with community input, but I still need to say that an offshoot of this discussion is how do we bring more of the residents downtown and make them feel welcome. I think the merchants are doing their best part. We're starting to do these open evenings, third Fridays, once a month. It seemed like a no-brainer to me to stay open a couple of extra hours on a Friday night. And no, what's the word we're using on our postcard? No purchase necessary. Leslie and I have been working on a postcard. It'll be all around town. It'll refer to a website where people can see who are the stores that are going to be open that night. I mean, this is your town. Let's get some support. Let's get the city to step up and have some tables in the arcade plaza where someone can have a picnic instead of sitting on the wet grass. Those things were planned at one time. So that's it.
Hallie, can I respond to that?
You can.
And I have something to say too when you're done.
This is a two-way street, is that if we want, I talk to friends that have businesses downtown, and they say that most of their business is on the weekend. Well, basically, the people, if you want locals to come downtown, businesses need to be able to make it worth their while. For instance, the Ojai Valley Inn, in their wisdom, has, I hate the card and the name of it, they call it the in crowd, right? And so, and if you belong to the in crowd, though, you can get 15% off of anything over at the inn. And why can't many of the businesses in town have have discounts for locals, so that when you go downtown during the week, that you can dine or you can use any service for a discounted rate? So we have to do something to be able to get people downtown. We have a rising senior population. What happened to the senior specials where you have the early dinners at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock and you make it affordable for them? So I think that I'm all in favor for it. I believe that we should all be spending our money, doing our Christmas shopping in town. I love to give my money to Alan Raines. I mean, my God, how could you have a better local community member? The guy gives to the community. He supports everything. If I spend $1 in there, I'm basically asking him to be able to take my dollar and spread it around the community. And it's not just Alan Raines. I want to spend my money with Dave West over at Westridge because I know that he's a local and that money's going to stay in Ojai. And I could go down the list of all the different places that. One of my favorite things, and I know that I don't want to go too off on this too much, but I love to be able to look at the Ojai Valley News does this Best of Ojai. And it's really an interesting thing to go down to the Art Center and to see the awards where we are voting on our hairdressers and our barbers and our electricians and you look at the list of all the different services that are going on in Ojai, and these are our friends and our neighbors, and these are the people we're really spending money with. It's not just the folks, we think of Ojai as a strip that's a block long in the middle of Ojai. It's not. We're looking at who's working on our car and who's an electrician, and when you buy an appliance, where do you go to buy it? And I think that we have an obligation. We might spend a little bit more money, but we have an obligation to be able to support the businesses in town first. On the other hand, the businesses in town have an obligation to be able to help us work with them. And if that means that they do a little something extra to be able to get us downtown, Khaled did the Monday night movie thing, right? Do you remember when we had a theater? Well, when we had a theater, he did a Monday night movie thing, and the place was packed. I mean, the place always packed. It was like half price. Well, and that, what it did is just brought people into town. And before I went to the movie, I usually ate someplace in town. And I think that this is something, I think it's just something that we need to be able to not only spend our money downtown, but the merchants need to be able to realize if they want to attract locals, they need to make it worth their while to come in. That's my...
I just have a point to the question, which is there's no website, so who's going to put it back up? And so we've heard that not the chamber, not the city. And so my question is, who is going to pick up the ball and lead the effort and the coordination of how we address tourism? I mean, who is going to do it? And I would put forth that it's not any one, that it's got to be, as I'm a broken record up here and I'm almost off, but it's got to be a collaboration and it has to be inclusive. Whether the Ojai Valley Youth Master Plan is a model, I have no idea, but there must be some structure where it's not all the city, because 75% of the residents live in the unincorporated areas, but who and how can we bring these people together in a room and get things going?
So, Caryn, you were just asked the question that you asked, so you'll get to now tell us the solution.
I just did.
Well, okay, but it's more specific than that. There are two related questions. The first one is, Caryn said vision is one of the key elements for sustainable tourism. Mm-hmm. What forum or process exists for creating a vision of our community? And the second one, related, how do we establish a forum for the three aspects of tourism that you mentioned?
Well, we just have to get people into a room and start talking, and there are all kinds of visioning methods to do it. But really, there's so much that we agree on, right? We want to keep our small town character. We value our beauty. We don't want there to be traffic. We do want the economy to thrive. We do want neighbors to be neighborly. All of those are aspects of a vision. If we clarify our values towards this vision, then we can start saying, well, are we being successful? Then we can have goals and metrics, and then we can be following them. We can have all kinds of roles for people in this process where it's clear where progress is being made. And I'm not able to tell you in 30 seconds what an actual visioning process is, but it can happen, and they're very exciting. The only thing that was close to it that I can say is 10 years ago, Supervisor Steve Bennett did the Valley-wide discussions, and it was a very, very inclusive, collaborative format, and a lot of good came from that. So that's the kind of thing.
Okay, Andy, do you have comments you want to make at the end, or should I save you time? Okay. Go to the Ojai retreat when we're done. There'll be a reception there and an opportunity to talk informally if you would like. I guess my last question is, would it be, for the whole panel, would it be a good idea for the city of Ojai to host a collective website or advisory board to find creative solutions to the tourism issue?
Yes, thank you. The more you talk, the better. That's what I think, and until you get tired of it, like STRs. But we do need to keep ongoing discussions about tourism, and we do that for so many other things, and it's the most important business in town. So I'd love to see that.
Yes. Hello.
It only works on one side or something. It's weird.
No, there, it's on. I say yes. The city's the only entity we have.
Well, as it says in the program, that I am president of the Ojai Valley Defense Fund, and the Defense Fund looks at the Ojai Valley from really Konigstein Road all the way down to Cedar Springs, because we are one ecosystem, for better or worse. We're one watershed. And if we're going to look at our problems, we need to look at them as a valley-wide problem and not just the city of Ojai. How we do that, I think that Steve Bennett would be very open to that sort of a conversation. And I think if we collaborated with our supervisors to be able to create some conversation, not only would it be good for the valley and for the environment of the valley, but it would also be good for the culture of the valley, because we would begin to talk with each other.
I agree with that. Since about 80% of the valley is Steve Bennett's jurisdiction, and Bill and I have responsibility for 4.5 square miles, we'd be happy to cooperate.
So please.
Well, the answer answer I've already said is yes, but I also want to say that it's not just getting everybody in a room and everybody talking, but we must create some principles and guidelines to guide the kind of communication we do in our community. And I just want to share, these are from Meditation Mount. It's the principles of right human relations. There's 6 of them. Sense of responsibility, understanding, compassion, love, harmlessness, and sharing. Okay.
Okay, well, just so few, do you want to say something before we? Yep.
I would like to read something. As somebody said earlier, the same conversation 40 years ago, but back in August of 1980 in the LA Times, there was an article that was entitled, "A Valley Outside of Time," referring to the Ojai Valley. And this is kind of what these people said. They said, Ojai has been favored in many ways. That Ojai endures, however, is due to the vigilance of those who prize its remoteness and serenity and fight off attempts to diminish them. They recognize that Ojai is above all a special frame of mind. In the end, however, it is a matter of proportion. We were using the term balance. Some things fit in this lovely little valley and others won't. It is a matter of mood as well as size. Places such as Ojai need people with patience, people who always have time for the pink moment. I got a little saccharine at the end, but you get the idea. And that is our brand. And for those who want to sell Ojai, protect the brand, and those who live here want to protect the brand.
So I just have a couple of quick comments winding up. I guess what I take away from this is a few things. One thing is that the quality of the conversation here is quite different than what you see on social media and even what you hear in city council meetings. I'm not saying anything against the city council. I understand that's a government problem. I'm just saying it seems interesting to me that when people get together with goodwill and honest differences and talk about them openly and in a productive way, good things come out of that. And that's, of course, I'm pushing the Chautauqua. Next, I'm going to ask you for money. That's the idea of the Chautauqua. So if that appeals to you, if you think that's valuable, and if you would like to participate in it, we would welcome your participation. You can do that by giving us money, you can volunteer your time, and you can volunteer your wisdom for how we put these pieces together most effectively. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you, panelists, for doing a wonderful job. Join us at the Ojai Retreat.